When I was working on the podcast automation that I've just built in N8N, an automation platform, for our daily book podcast, which just gives you the gist of a book, classics, New York Times bestsellers. There's a new episode every single day. One of the hardest parts of that whole process was the prompting. Not really building the automation itself. That was challenging, but the prompting was really difficult because I needed the AI to give me specific text in a very specific manner. And this would be the case for Zapier or Make.com or any automation tool where you're bringing in an OpenAI model or any large language model, but particularly models that are geared towards chatting like GPT-4o or GPT-4o Mini. In fact, that's why it's called ChatGPT. These models are strongly instructed to be conversational. But this means that it would frequently give me an output with a lot of extraneous information in a chat-like way, which would waste tokens and it adds extra data. It complicates the automation because I would need to then add in a separate step that would then remove all the chat that it had just put in. So how do you get GPT-4 to provide you with exactly what you need so that you don't have to spend your time removing a bunch of text later on? Imagine that if I ran the automation and uploaded 10 episodes and I had to go into both transistor.fm where I host my podcast and also on my blog and remove all of the here's your description and that's the description you wanted. Let me know if you need any other help. And I had to do that 10 times for every podcast episode. It would no longer be automated. It would be a pain is what it would be. So I've got 10 tricks for you that should help with this and get ChatGPT to shut up. Tip number 1, no yapping. I love this simple 2-word instruction. I got it from Reddit, so I can't take credit for it. And it really does cut down on the blather that you get from ChatGPT. It just put it in your system instructions. Let me show you. Here in your custom instructions, you'll want to put it in the bottom box and at the bottom of whatever it is that you are saying. So if you have a bunch of instructions on how you want ChatGPT to respond, at the bottom, then add in no yapping. And trick number 2, my favorite, no blather. No yapping or blather I have in my custom instructions at the bottom, but also I recommend that you add it to the memory as well too. You can do this by just saying something like, please remember that I or the user or your name or whatever strongly requests that you have no blather or no yapping or words to that effect. And once that's in your memory, I've noticed that things that are in your custom instructions, the model does follow, but it doesn't follow it as heavily and strongly and consistently as instructions that are in the memory. So put it in both places. If no yapping isn't enough, you can also try no preamble or no post commentary, something like that. If no isn't working for you or it's still not listening to you, try the word avoid. Avoid, for some reason, tends to work better than the word no when asking ChatGPT not to do something, particularly if that not the thing you don't want it to do is language related. For example, ChatGPT loves the words delve, tapestry, transform, and it's very difficult to tell it not to do it, not to give these words, because once those words are in its context window, in its chat, whatever you've just said, it will then output more of the same. That's basically, it's like a goldfish. That's whatever's most recently there in its memory is what it's going to strongly remember and output more of. So if you say, I want you to give me a short story, but don't use the following words, you're fairly likely to get those words. I don't know why it is that large language models don't listen to no very well, but I do know that they listen to the word avoid a lot better. It just creates a stronger bias to prevent unwanted behavior. Tip number 4, I came up with in desperation. When I was working with GPT-4 in the podcast automation, there was a place in which I could not get the model to output the description exactly as I needed it to. Right here. In order to get the description to look good in all podcast players and also on YouTube and also on the website, on the blog, on the Ghost blog, I needed to have it be in HTML. The problem with this is that ChatGPT outputs things, and I know I'm saying ChatGPT. I'm talking about both ChatGPT or GPT-4, whether you're using it on the web or whether you're using it in an automation. So it's really strongly focused on giving you Markdown. Whenever you see it give you a table when you're working in ChatGPT or it give you a blog post, it's using Markdown to show you headers and that kind of thing. So I needed it to give me HTML, and I could not get it to give me that and only that. So that means no asterisks, no nothing like that. Let me show you what Markdown is over here. Markdown is very, very common. You have used Markdown without even knowing it. If you have bolded something on Reddit, for example, or on Discord, you're using Markdown behind the scenes. And different Markdown, particularly headers, indicate to the model how important something is. When you structure your prompt in such a way that you have, say, header 1, and then underneath that some instructions, and header 2 instructions, it's going to treat the instructions under header 1 more importantly than under header 2. You can also use other methods like bolding things, like right here where I say remember and I bold things right there. However, it continued to give me Markdown. So I used this psychological trick. You understand that this must render in various podcast players, and therefore you only output the text and the HTML tags. And that cut out almost all of it. And I was pretty surprised because when I thought of this, I was really desperate and had been struggling with this for hours and hours and hours on end. And I could not get it to stop doing what I didn't want it to do. And so I said, well, why don't I just try explaining why it is that I don't want it to do this? Instead of saying, though, don't do this because of X, I thought, what if I just sort of tell it what it knows? That, therefore, it would have some quote unquote ownership to not do that thing. Well, I know I shouldn't do this thing, as opposed to I'm being told not to do this thing. It was a psychological trick and it worked. And I've put this near the bottom because of tip number 5. For the things that you want the model to remember, put it near the bottom of the prompt. I have, in this case, the output, the final output I want is at the absolute bottom. I have some strong here instructions that are even more important than this instruction. And I really was trying to get the model to give me spacing, basically. Large language models do not like to output nothing. They want to output text. If, for example, you want spacing, wide spacing, I'm just going to open up today's book here and scroll down. I wanted very wide spacing for readability between the paragraphs. I wanted short paragraphs. And this is basically double spacing. In order to get that, telling the model double spacing or 2 enters or extra space, none of that worked. So, and because I needed that to be in HTML, I needed to have this empty space here. And it really struggled with this. It just kept wanting to put some text there. And so it would just blatantly ignore this. It would just say, she couldn't possibly mean that she wants nothing. She wants something. I shall put something. I know better than this human. And so this was a strong point of contention between myself and ChatGPT. And there were moments where I thought if this thing was corporeal, how do you say that? Corporeal, that we would come to blows if this thing had a body. So finally, I got that by using the you understand, placing that near the bottom of the prompt, and using Markdown and all caps right here. Important. The Markdown, the 2 asterisks, indicate that this would be bold if it were to be displayed on ChatGPT or Discord or Reddit. It would show up as bold. And the model knows that bolded items that are all caps are to be paid extra attention to. So when I'm putting in 2 exclamation points here and I'm using bold, I'm not just yelling at the model. I mean, I am, because after it's been hours and hours, it's 3 a.m. and you're pretty tired, you start yelling. But I'm also doing this strategically as well too. Number 6 and number 7, number 6 being use all caps, which I've mentioned already. And number 7 is, number 7, this is one of my favorites. And I learned this one from OpenAI themselves. This is the system prompt as of today, as of this recording, that is given to ChatGPT before it does anything that you would see. And at the bottom of this prompt is what I want to draw your attention to right here. I repeat. Now, I want to tell you, I did not write this. This is the system prompt. That means OpenAI wrote this. Somebody in OpenAI was pretty frustrated getting GPT-4 to give charts for the user that use Matplotlib over Seaborn. And you can see that right here, they're having the same exact problem that I was already describing. They said, never use Seaborn. In other words, no or don't. And because that wasn't working, they had to add on here, use this instead of that. And so that's part of this here trick that I'm giving you, number 7, is I repeat. Those are powerful words in all caps, but also give it what you do want as opposed to what you don't want. And when I look at this, I see that Matplotlib is increased, is said here twice. Seaborn said twice. If I were to write this, I would instead of saying never use Seaborn, I would say always use Matplotlib. And then down here, I would say you must understand, or you understand that Matplotlib is going to be more effective over Seaborn, and maybe give it a reason. And over here, it's giving never ever. That's another one. Now you can see again how much the model ignores a no. So that even OpenAI, there's some tired engineer or prompt engineer in OpenAI who wrote this, probably at 3 a.m. going, I cannot get this stupid model to stop doing this, and we're releasing this tomorrow. How do I get to stop giving us, the charts that we didn't want? So again, you can learn a little bit of something. At least even OpenAI gets super frustrated with their models, basically. So my next tip, which I think is tip number 8, I'm not sure, is to go in and step by step. And I had to do this because I had one part, this description thing, I spent so much time here. I had one part here where the description would be outputting in a code block. Let me show you what a code block is. You've probably seen this a lot in ChatGPT, but how you write a code block is like this. This is a file that's created by that automation that I'm working on. It gives me 2 files. It gives me the slideshow file, and it also gives me this file that has the approach that I'm going to approach the video, some emotions that I'm focused on in the metadata and the marketing of the video, how I'm going to phrase the video, the titles, some keyword phrases, but it also gives me the description. And I have asked it to give me this description in a code block this particular time, but I did not want it to do that when using the description for the podcast. And when you have a code block here, most of the time, the language that the code block is in will be here at the top, and how this ends up looking, putting that little markdown right there. And again, that would never do, because I would have to go into every single episode and remove the word markdown and those 3 backticks from the top and the bottom of the text. I found out that the reason why it was doing this was after I went line by line. Up here, I had asked it to output the text in a markdown formatted text. I believe those were my exact words. And what I wanted was for it to give the top part as Markdown and the bottom part as HTML. And that was very messy. But the point is, I just basically wanted it to give me text with some Markdown and some HTML. And it continued to see that phrasing as something that needed to be in a code block. I don't exactly know why, but when I finally went in and just looked for Markdown and removed the word Markdown, removed the word formatted text, I finally got a complete description. So that's my next tip. If ChatGPT or GPT-4 in an automation is giving you something and it's persistent, check and make sure that you haven't stuck something in there that might be changing the way the model is outputting, something that you wouldn't have thought of, that the model is understanding differently than you, the human, are. And finally, you want to carefully engineer your prompt to reinforce the desired behavior. The number one way to do that is through the structure of the prompt. Again, using headings. I clearly break up the text. I give it text that I want it to use later on here as a variable. And then I call that variable later on when I want it to be used in a specific way here. The text is very clearly broken apart, and the structure of the text the model will tend to copy the structure of your prompt when it outputs your text structure as well too. So when I was giving it this large description prompt, I basically broke it up the same way I wanted the output. I've just switched over to the prompt that I'm using for my YouTube description. If you want to see what the output of that prompt looks like, just look in the description of this video. And I break it up as to step 1 and the first line, step 2, headers, step 3, sections. I wrote this some months ago. I can look at this now and see that I would probably improve it if I were writing it now today. You can see here that I've gone into step 3 sections. I would have added some headers here and then maybe some subheaders here to indicate what I wanted. I'm getting what I need from the model, so I won't make any changes because I don't want to ruin a good thing. But over here, having this broken down with exactly what you're looking for, and then down at the bottom, I did vitally important here. I would probably change that. I did add some you understand as well too, near the bottom, the final things I wanted it to do. And with this, it reliably gives me a description that I'm looking for. So some final tips for prompt engineering. And if you think that prompt engineering is just a lofty term that people made up to make themselves feel better, when you start using AI automation and you're prompting and you're trying to get really specific things from the model, particularly the prompts that I used to get the slideshow, which I will actually show you some of those prompts and that process so you can see how extensive that is. This will be a video that I do break down for you. There's a 5-step process of prompting that I use to get the slides. And the prompts not only needed to be written very, very carefully, but they also needed to be written in a certain order. And that's what prompt chaining means. I couldn't have the prompt do this until I did that. And I have different text coming in, and it's all ordered in a very specific way down here with some bolding, some extra importance, and also the you know or you understand trick. You understand, you know, and you must include, and you also understand. When I started really focusing on just telling the model what it knew, that worked so well. So I do strongly recommend that. So I would look forward to giving you this whole breakdown of how I'm building out this YouTube automation. And I will do that as soon as it is complete. But for now, know that prompt engineering is a careful placement and a choice of words, and it will guide the GPT's behavior. Try every trick in the book, and if you think of more, feel free to share them and let us know in the comments below. And be mindful of how the model is geared or biased towards outputting content. And then after that, it really is a refining prompt situation, because the one entity that taught me the most about prompting was GPT-4 itself, by not doing what I wanted and me trying different things until I understood why it wasn't giving me what I wanted, and then writing out prompts that spoke to it, spoke its language, basically. It's a large language model, and instead of trying to get it to understand us all the time, I spend most of my time trying to get myself to understand it. I showed you this whole entire podcast automation. And if you'd like to see it, if you'd like to buy it, you can do both of those at this video, which is on screen right now.